Today's breakdown will analyze Joe Rogan's thoughts on UFC's most technical fighters.
Because we're witnessing the genocide of a people, and then we're also witnessing a group that will remain in power that is not just committed genocide, but is committed to genocide.
Right. So what we were talking about and all of the points I was bringing up on Tucker were all from before that. In fact, they were from a full year before the German invasion of the Soviet Union. That was June 1941, and that's where most of the Jews lived. They were in, so if Hitler never invaded the Soviet Union, he never even would have had access to those people. Now, Hitler didn't like the Soviet Union, all the way back in Mein Kampf and everywhere else. I mean, it was central to his ideology that communism, socialism were the enemy and everything. He may have invaded the Soviet Union someday and gone after all the Jews when he did.
When did Hitler start going after the Jews?
You mean in terms of
rhetoric?
The war? So yeah, like if you take him at his word in Mein Kampf, which is, it's a piece of political propaganda, that he wrote as a sort of a politician in Germany in 1924, and so you have to take it with sort of a grain of salt, but it's also one of the few sources we have, like. And given his audience at the time, he probably didn't have a lot of reason to make this part up, is that he had been from like small town Germany, right? And he was from a middle class family. His father was a civil servant, respectable people. And nationalism back then was very much like a middle class ideology. And the middle class people, nationalists, would complain about the workers and the proletariat, how they all want to be socialists and none of them have any national feeling and everything. And Hitler really didn't grow up with any really even knowledge of the Jews. He says his father, he never heard him say the word, and if they had any in the small town that he lived in, like they were apparently well assimilated because he didn't know about them. And so then he moves to Vienna when he's a young adult, and there's a lot of Jews in Vienna. And he starts to, he's at the bottom of society now. He's literally living in shelters. He's hungry all the time. He's like down with the underclass after having grown up in the middle class. And so he's starting to get a look at what the German people, the German masses, that he's like sort of as a child and a young man is like worked up this deep sense of like nationalistic fervor. He's actually getting an up close look at the underclass in Vienna, and what he sees is not particularly impressive, which is often the case when you can have sympathy for and want to lift up the underclass in any society, but the reason you want to do that is because they're often living degraded lives in degraded circumstances. And so he gets an up close look at this, and he doesn't like what he sees. And he says in Mein Kampf that it really caused him like a moral crisis, an ideological crisis. He's like, are these the German people? Like, really? This is what we're talking about? And then he says, and this is the way he relates it. He says it was actually the key that unlocked everything else for him, is that, he would say he realized, we could say he came to believe that, yes, these German masses, they are in a sorry state right now, but the reason for that is that they're being manipulated by the Jews, by the Jewish press, by the Jews who own the theaters and put out the films and whatever else. All of that, they're being manipulated and corrupted by these people. And so for him, it became like I think, he had a lot of the same explanations and reasons you would hear from any anti-Semite then or now, banking and whatever. Like all those things were like in there. But I think the thing that gave it emotional valence for him is that his anti-Semitism was what allowed him to love the German people. Like it was like the only way for him that he could get around the revulsion he was feeling and actually being up close with the German underclass. Is he excused their faults by blaming Jews, and so his sense of love for his people. And I mean, look, Hitler's one of those guys. I noticed this when I was reading all the Jim Jones books and stuff, which I think I read probably all of. They're not very good. Some of them are interesting, like they're good reads, but you can't help but notice, especially after you've read several of the books, that the authors just cannot help but be like cynical and turn it into a polemic on every page. Like even the thing Jim Jones or Hitler did as a child, they have like negative editorializing to it and everything. And it's like, it really kind of, it's a lot of them are still good books. You read like the most recent sort of great Hitler biography by Ian Kershaw is a great book. He's good at